this is kind of where, the active learning comes into play. So I personally, I thought I knew what I was doing. And as I'm teaching these classes, I'm actually learning a lot myself, especially about, AEDs and how many, lives that AEDs actually save. And I go over them, just in like the BLS class. And I've had people reach out to me about, wanting to purchase them. And I wanted to get one for, myself and, the business and my parents and such like that. So,
welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. Okay. Welcome to another Provider Spotlight episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and my guest today is a CRNA who, when finding herself at a crossroads in life, decided to go all in on her business, becoming an active learner and figuring it out as she went along. Aubi Nemeth is coming up on her 15th year of nursing, with the last 9 being as a CRNA. She's worked at the same large hospital system her whole career, but spent the last 5 years in the Cardiothoracic and Vascular ORs. Aubi started her own CPR and AED business 3 years ago. It's called Sixth City CPR, and she's really finding her niche teaching ACLS and PALS to advanced providers. She recently took on those AED sales and opened her first brick-and-mortar location. In an attempt to find the balance, Aubi enjoys spending time with her boys, getting her butt kicked in CrossFit, and going to concerts post-pandemic. Welcome to the show today, Aubi.
Hi, thanks, Bobby. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. We had some technical difficulties when we first started trying to get this episode together, but those are all fixed now, so we're good to go.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we mentioned that you reached a crossroads about 3 years ago. So can you elaborate on that experience a bit?
Well, it just kind of seemed like actually it started off as more of a natural progression, sort of this kind of thing as a side gig, and COVID, the world got hit with COVID. And I was still in the very, very early stages of the business. And I kind of wasn't, I kind of just doing it here and there, nothing too seriously. And, when COVID happened, all of these, nurses kind of came out from the woodwork, essentially. So the crossroads actually kind of happened a little bit later. But initially, it just picked up almost too quickly that I could, keep up with. And then it just kind of progressed. Do you want me to elaborate now on the
Sure. Yeah.
proverbial crossroad?
Yeah.
So again, kind of figuring it out as I went along, the demand was there. So I was like, I guess I'll just keep, progressing and kind of pretending like I know what I'm doing, essentially. And for the most part, healthcare providers, everyone's been like totally awesome. You'll get kind of like a jerk every once in a while, but people would reach out to me and like, there's a need, then I will, just kind of pivot and give the people what they need. And once the kind of pandemic started settling down, I was doing a lot more kind of traveling and local groups. Unfortunately, right in the middle of COVID, my husband had lost his job. He's also a nurse. And it just really brings a good point to, I was like so stressed, and where I was working at was very bad COVID, little kids trying to do, one of them has a disability, trying to do the online learning. So financially, I was really, overwhelmed and stressed out with my husband losing his job. However, it gave me very much like a stability. He was kind of the rock at home, taking care of things. And when the dust kind of started to settle and the kids went back to school and things got better, I was like, okay, what do we do? Do you go back to work? Do we kind of go all in on the business and, kind of wing it, which is what we decided to do. It was scary. And essentially the next step was, okay, do we want to open a brick and mortar? Do I want to keep, traveling a lot? Do I want to try to do both? So those were kind of all the things coming at me at once.
Yeah. A lot of variables there. So
yes, a lot
of decisions that you had to make. And I mean, of course, there are a lot of CPR classes already out there. So, you're having to find ways to stand out, from the crowd. And so what is it that makes your classes different and makes you so passionate about the experience that people have?
So I kind of base my, essentially my whole business model on trying to be as stress-free as possible. So we're talking about serious subject matter, we're talking about people's lives. And I was targeting all healthcare workers. And honestly, a lot of them were CRNAs or some type of advanced providers who, I like to say, like, get it. So it did kind of take the heat off of me a little bit, as far as, obviously I feel a moral obligation to make sure that everyone is confident with the material. But it was, I thought to myself, well, what do I want when I take courses? And I was like, well, I don't want to go, somewhere for 8 or 10 hours on my Saturday off and, review the same material that I've been going over the last 2 decades. So that's kind of, obviously I do this when deemed appropriate, depending on the kind of the audience, but essentially cut out the fluff. Okay. So I'm going to, meet the requirements, but, I don't really go above what's required unless there is a need for it. So that's kind of how I, made myself stand out. And I think because that's what I would want, other people appreciated that. And then I try to just, go with the flow as much as I can. And I don't aim for perfection, which I think is probably one of the most helpful, things I've kind of, realized. And I, kind of emphasize that in my classes as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as CRNAs, we have to, figure out how to read a room, and that's something that obviously when you're teaching classes, you can tell if certain people are really getting it or if they're struggling with a certain piece. So you do have to, make things a little bit different for people sometimes. So kudos to you for working on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. But well, so, teaching CPR classes and selling AED machines, they kind of seem to go hand in hand, but they are actually pretty different business models. So what made you decide to go in the AED sales direction?
Well, this is kind of where, the active learning comes into play. So I'm, I personally, I thought I knew what I was doing. And as I'm teaching these classes, I'm actually learning a lot myself, especially about, AEDs and how many, lives that AEDs actually save. And I go over them, just in like the BLS class. And I've had people reach out to me about, wanting to purchase them. And I wanted to get one for, myself and, the business and my parents and such like that. So it just kind of seemed like the natural, like, oh, let me just try it. But it is really different because I tend to not be like a very salesy person. It's just not my personality. I don't like putting pressure on people or, so that's actually been a little bit of a struggle for me, trying to figure out, especially because that's not my, that's not what I went to school for. That's not my background. So it's definitely very, very different. And, I am still trying to kind of perfect that.
Yeah. The sales is challenging. I've had to learn how to do more of that, and I'm still working on that myself because, I try to think of it as, hey, I'm not trying to sell you something. I'm trying to give you an opportunity. I'm showing this opportunity to you that's going to improve your life in some way, and even so, it's hard to do. To make those sales, to kind of push people, because sometimes you do get excited about what you're selling, and but like you said, you don't want to seem too pushy. So
yeah, right, well, exactly, and not everyone else is necessarily as excited as you are. So
that's the truth too. Yeah, I mean, I talk about real estate quite a bit, and people's eyes, kind of glaze over. So, right. But well, tell me more about the AED stuff. Like, where do you source your devices? How do you determine price points? What kind of marketing do you do? All that kind of stuff.
So it's actually very interesting. Just like everything else in the world, thanks to, the pandemic, there's manufacturing backups. So I just signed on with the company to be a distributor, and I had to file all the appropriate paperwork for that. And it does vary like a little bit state to state. But essentially, I order my products through them, and I can either choose to, like I have a baseline stock with me, and then depending if people want large bulk or whatever, I can send it directly from the, where they're being manufactured. As far as price points, again, this has been, hindsight 2020. I wish I would have gotten so much more inventory prior to, all these manufacturing issues, because the prices have skyrocketed. And especially, after this Damar Hamlin cardiac arrest, that was publicized essentially all over the world. Now everyone within a week wants to own AED. So it's a supply demand thing. So the demand is definitely going up. The supply is going down, so which means the cost is also going to go up. But I try to, I honestly don't have a huge profit margin on them. I just think it's a kind of a nice extra thing that, I can add. And then it even helps with, sales of like the classes, because if someone at a local company wants to purchase an AED and they're like, well, we're buying this AED, why don't we just have you come in and teach a class for our whole group? Yeah. So they kind of do, even if I don't have a ton of like profit from the actual unit, it kind of like segues into other opportunities.
Yeah, they seem to marry pretty well together. So that's cool. So and you realized that it was time to kind of open up a brick and mortar location. So what led to that decision? And then, tell me more about that whole experience.
Well, it was kind of becoming tedious packing up all of the things when I'm going to multiple locations, which I am still doing that. But I had, individuals, not just groups that were reaching out to me. So I needed like a central location, and I was kind of doing this co-working share space situation. And it was hard because again, I having to lug all that stuff in, but just kind of the growing pains of what you do in the beginning of a business. I had an opportunity to, get rid of some personal debt, and gave me a little bit of, financial freedom to make that decision. Should I make this investment? And initially, so, I just went on Facebook Marketplace or Googled, places for rent by me, and looking at very, very small places. I almost got this one little classroom. It was, in the basement of like a medical office building or something. That would have been like perfect. Very inexpensive. The rent was like $500 a month. I mean, there's like virtually no maintenance. There's essential bathroom, all the things. And, I'm just one of those people. I do a lot of things based on intuition. I don't know if I necessarily recommend that for everyone, but that's kind of just, I react just based on, if I feel like I'm almost getting a sign from the universe. And, anyways, went to, dinner one night, and there was just the sign I noticed next door to the restaurant that was for rent. And it was like a mile from my house. The way the shape, the space was filled and, shaped, it looked like it would be, almost, it was very small, but, optimal layout. So I just reached out, and, the rent was like quite a bit more, but so much more convenient, better location. So it's definitely a very hard decision to make. And initially, I didn't know if I wanted to have like a brick and mortar. I was like, let me just go look at them to see. But I think when you plant that seed, you're almost like, it's going to happen. So I kind of just, it kind of just snowballed. I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this, then why don't I do this? And then now here I am. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And I appreciate the detail you put into that story, because, it's, I've got a cousin who's into junk removal, and, he's looking for places because he wants to do resales and things like that. And so it's a different experience for everybody, depending on where you live and how you go about it. But I love that you mentioned the Facebook Marketplace. That's something I would not have even thought about going to try and find a place to rent for my business. So, well, let's just spitball here a little bit. Where do you see this taking you in the next 5-10 years? Like, you've started this business, it's growing. What do you see happening in the next several years?
That's an excellent question. And I've definitely, thought about that myself, and had, this conversation with my husband, and even in my head, like, what is the end goal here? And, I'm not exactly sure, but if I'm given opportunities, I feel like I need to take them.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, because I'm only 3 years into doing this, it's still kind of, I feel like it's a lot of work. But ideally, I hope to get some more help doing these classes. I never thought I would be opening a brick and mortar and being as busy as I am. I mean, literally, I thought I would do like one class every couple of months or something, very like sporadically.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, that if people need it, then I'll be here doing it. But again, just with kind of the universe working the way it does. My mom's also a nurse. She unfortunately recently got laid off from her job. And it's just like the perfect, opportunity. I'm going to bring her in. She's going to help me teach some of these classes. And there's a huge need for community classes. And initially no desire to do that. I didn't want to go anywhere near, lay people community. I mean, that's like, talk about ethical, moral responsibility. People, we're so far removed from it. People truly, they don't know, they don't know a lot. Anyways, but I just got my feet wet in that, reaching out to the community and doing some free things. And I mean, wow, like it truly makes a difference. I actually felt like, people were like captivated by things I'm, was saying, and it's all stuff that I just is like common sense, but it's not though, because we're so far removed from that situation. So this has honestly just been like the last month that this has happened with the community stuff. And I really enjoy it more than I thought I would. So I do see in the future kind of just spreading, making, under that whole umbrella. So I'm excited for that. Again, I'm only one person, so trying to, work smarter, not harder. And I think I'm getting there.
So how many classes are you doing per week or month right now? And how are you marketing those classes?
So the good thing about, owning your own business and doing these things is kind of like you have freedom. So the control is basically in your hands. So if I feel like I need a break or I'm doing too much, then I'll schedule, less classes. The problem is I have a hard time saying no to people. But I would say I was doing 2 to 3 classes a week.
Okay.
And it's too, it's a little bit too much. So I did take a break kind of around the holidays, and scaled back a little bit. And then I, had some help teaching some other courses. But definitely, at minimum 1 a week. And then sometimes, I'll do more than that. And what's happening now is I'm having, these companies contact me, so many like requests for private classes, which in a way is awesome because it's different from open enrollment where you're just hoping people would show up. This is like a guaranteed, number of people. And it kind of like, it's like, well, I don't have to think about it. There's going to be a group there. So that's very, very nice. As far as marketing, to be completely transparent, it's mostly word of mouth. Honestly, it really, really is. Yeah. I do have a website. I try to, do social media. I don't know how well I'm, doing that, but, again, teaching myself as I go. But as far as the marketing, it's truly been a lot of like word of mouth situation.
Okay. That's interesting because I would have guessed that you were more getting stuff from social media posts or something like that, or local advertisements or something, but
like here and there. There are some that trickle in, especially, but I've only had this place open for a couple months. So, people are still kind of figuring it out locally. And then I've had several people that have showed up with their cell phones wanting me to repair them. So it is not a cell phone repair. Didn't even think of that. And I'm like, huh? And they're like, well, what's CPR? I'm like, well, what do you mean, what is CPR? But again, I don't think about that. But they, there's a lot of these cell phone repair places. So I'm, that's just one of the things that you don't think about, but there's lots of things like that.
That is so funny. Because I've seen the cell phone repair things that do, have the CPR kind of logo. And I've always thought, oh, they're playing off of healthcare. And now, people come to you and think you're playing off of that. So
right, exactly.
You never know, but
exactly.
Well, as we kind of start to close out here, what I wanted to do was ask you if you have some advice that you would give to other folks who are considering becoming an entrepreneur. You're 3 years into this journey now. You have some good experiences. So what advice do you have for people who are thinking about getting started?
Well, I think many CRNAs, especially, had kind of have that type A personality, perfectionism, and that is not always a bad thing, but it's not always a good thing either. I had some, life events that kind of made me it reminded me that sometimes you just need to go with it and just get started. You don't need to have a perfectly executed plan.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have steps A through Z planned out. Just start with step A and then pivot when you're ready for step B, and it will just kind of happen. But if you wait till you are ready, like, you're never going to be ready. You just need to do it and take a chance, which is essentially what I did. I mean, obviously I started on a smaller scale and it just kind of escalated. But I think, just like anything in life, there's never the perfect time or the ideal time to do something. And you just need to, be that active learner and kind of figure it out as you go. Highly recommend finding some type of mentor that can, is willing to teach you. And a lot of it is, like, you learn by your mistakes, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
If you can find someone that kind of has been through it and they've made some of these mistakes, that's helpful as well. So you could kind of, avoid some of those kind of like growing pains, essentially.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Well, before we go, I want to give people a chance to learn more about you and Sixth City CPR. So how can listeners get a hold of you?
Anyone can go to my website. It's sixthcitycpr.com, or shoot me an email at info@sixthcitycpr.com.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Aubi. Thank you.
Thank you.
I always love it when people with a different type of business drop by. So I hadn't had anybody on before now with CPR classes, or at least not AED sales,
Mm-hmm.
as well. So, thanks for dropping by.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
I enjoyed learning how Aubi's business has grown over the last few years, first focusing on fellow providers and now moving into the layperson space. She epitomizes the idea of an active learner, constantly working to improve her practice, her courses, and her business offerings. I also appreciated her candor about the margins on AED sales. Not everything you do in your business is going to show tremendous profit. I mean, AEDs are not making her much money, but they can lead to other positive things in your business. It's really important to keep an eye out for those complementary offerings that you can include that lead to either more business or quote unquote stickier customers. That's going to do it for the show. If you're interested in starting your own CPR course or even getting into AED sales, make sure you check out the show notes so that you can reach out and ask Aubi some questions. This is Bobby Jones signing off. Until next time, stay safe and take care of each other out there. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.